We are continuing unit 37. 37? Not confused. 37 of the Morenu Shabbat unit here in the Beit Midrash of Eretz Chamda with the Menucha of Sir Naim Dan Garson and Sir Moshe Montefiore. We've learned last week, we went into the question of why Muktze. Why Muktze anyway? So part of the reason we learned one issue that came up from Nehemiah and from that context, and then the Gemara in Shabbat of Kuf Kaf Gimel had to do with Tiltul, with Hotzam Rishud Rishud, right? If you don't carry things needlessly, your chances of carrying them from places where you're not allowed to carry them are lower. The Rambam presented three other reasons, right? I'll just say his main points briefly over here on page, 4. Number one is to distinguish and differentiate between the way things look on Shabbat and the way, right? You don't talk on Shabbat in certain ways. You also don't carry similar ways on Shabbat. That's number one. Number two, if you carry things that normally you violate Shabbat with, there's more of a chance that you'll end up inadvertently violating Shabbat with them. And number three, to make the Shvita aspect of the Shabbat more noticeable, more part of the Shabbat. Question number one, so these are three very nice reasons, right? We don't want you going around and schlepping things the whole Shabbos, all right? But what's the Rambam source for all of this? The Gemara in the Kuf Kaf Gimel and Shabbat seems to say that the issue of Muktze has to do with Tiltul, with Hotzam Rishud Rishud, with Hotzam Rishud Rishud, that you're not allowed to carry from one issue to another. So we tell you don't carry things needlessly. So where's the Rambam? How did the Rambam?
But the 90%, so more. Carry on.
We'll get to that soon. It's an interesting point. Depends on what you mean by Muktze, which is something we're going to go into more deeply into shortly. Okay, practical. We're gonna have to define that more carefully in a moment. Where'd the Rambam take these from? So says Markevet Mishneh, this idea of the distinction between how Shabbat looks has to do with wait, I confused them. So the very distinction that we have between Kli Shemach Torah Yisrael and Kli Shemach Torah Heter, why would Chazal differentiate between a Kli Shemach Torah Yisrael, right, and a tool that's normally used for violation of Shabbat? Why would the Rambam have such a distinction? Why would the Gemara have any such distinction? It must be that the part of the goal of Muktze to dissuade you from carrying things that might cause you to violate Shabbat with, that might allow you to violate Shabbat with them. Do you want to close the door? Sorry, just there. That's number one. Number two, the distinction between carrying for the lights on. Number two is if there's a distinction between carrying things. See, it worked. I said close the door, so then everyone came. Number two is we're doing quick chazara, so don't worry, guys. Number two is if there's distinction between carrying items for their own use and carrying them to put in their proper places, that means that you're not going to rearrange your. What happened to the rest of the copies?
I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, figure it out. All right. No, I thought we had more copies. I'm sorry. I'll just try to make sure there are more in the future. It's okay. We're hoping to finish this unit soon and move on to the next one. So hopefully I have enough copies for that. Anyway. Number two is, why am I not allowed to carry things for their own, right? I'm not allowed to carry for their own use, right? I'm allowed to carry them for my own use, but not for the item's benefit. Meaning I'm not allowed to rearrange my house effectively. So if I want to rearrange my toolboxes, make sure everything's in place, I'm not allowed to do that because that would be for my my screws and my tools, right?
You're going to take them off the table for my use?
So I'm taking them off the table. So if they're on the table, I want to remove them. I'm getting them out of the way. That won't lead me to rearranging that's for me. And then I'm not rearranging my house. But I'm just setting up the Shabbat table on which I happened to forget my screwdriver. But if I'm allowed to carry the screwdriver for the screwdriver's sake, so then I'll start rearranging the other. What I'll do on Shabbos, what I'll do all day is rearrange my shed or whatever.
Moving around furniture.
So that's the third one. Very good. Because the Gemara differentiates, according to Abai, between carrying with one hand or with two, according to Rava, carrying one person or two people. Why would we be more machmir with carrying something that's carried with two people? We see we're trying to dissuade you from working hard. Right? Just schlepping couches around is something you should not be doing. Lahalacha, you're allowed to carry them. But clearly the goal is that you won't be rearranging your home. Why? So the pshat of the Gemara is that even if it's not that, even Klisha Achtola Hetel, you're only allowed to carry on your own. You can't carry with someone else's help. Now, then lahalacha, we don't, and that would mean even carrying couches around, which are Klisha Achtola Hetel, right? Even those you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to carry around on Shabbos with someone else.
If I want to rearrange my
Right, so lahalacha. So yeah, that's right. So all right. So these are two slightly different things. One is the effort investing, and the other is what is the content of my Shabbat.
So if you're assuming you're rearranging it kind of for after Shabbat, you don't need the space on Shabbat.
If you're moving things around, furniture around for use on Shabbat. So that's one thing. What I mean is to rearrange the living room because I want to rearrange my living room in general, right? Now, lahalacha, I am able to. Correct. So that's how the Markavet Mishnah connects the Gemara with the Rambam. Now, the question comes up: why would the Rambam not? Why did the Gemara? Okay, we have a few questions. I just want to sum up the questions we have. Wait, Rav Baruch wants to say something. Yes.
If you take the rearranging of furniture, would that mean you can't move any of your chairs on Shabbat?
So
by making that the example, it creates potential questions for people.
I agree. Again, part of the problem with what we're doing here is the Rambam did the following process. I think you're right. I need to define this a bit more carefully. The Rambam did the following process. He said, why did Chazal say you shouldn't carry Muktze on Shabbat? So he looks at the process of the Heterim and said every step of that remained Asur informs us about the reason why. Right, so if there was a point at which we allowed people to only carry things with one hand, or there was a point we only allowed a person to carry on his own, but not together with someone else, these are indicative of the reasoning behind them, right? That indicates that when Chazal said don't carry Muktze, part of what they mean is don't work too hard on Shabbos. Which should mean, we then follow, don't rearrange your living room. Now question, according to the halachot of Muktze, am I allowed to rearrange my living room on Shabbat? The answer is I am. Right? Because Lemaise, we were matir that afterwards, right? But if I go back to the idea of Shabbat ki b'chol, it seems to be against the spirit of Shabbat, even if it's not halachically properly asur, right? Right, for other reasons, correct.
No,
What?
If you're planning for something, but you could do something you want to feel good, like you have an hour.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
I think clearly if you've got guests coming, you want to move the room around.
So if you have guests coming on, you move them around for Shabbat. So that's one thing, right? So that's also not against the spirit of Shabbat.
Right. Clearly, if you're hosting a party tomorrow, then
right. So what are you talking about? We're saying, you know what? I really think that our living room would look nicer if the couches were set over there. And then now this would also be nicer on Shabbat itself. Doesn't make it also be nice on Shabbat itself, but that's not what you should be doing on Shabbat. There's a middle ground. Correct. It's not correct. There's no. Again, the question is, what are Chazal indicating to us that Shabbat, right? What's the content Shabbat should have based on this idea? That's what the Rambam is trying to do. So I agree. It's a fair question, fair comment, right? How far does the Rambam take this, right? what are we supposed to do with these tamim that don't always necessarily follow through to the actual practical hilchot muktze, right? Because in the end, on a practical level, you're allowed to carry couches around. What?
Quantity is.
And we'll get to that in a moment. That's an important point. You're right, but let me get to that. Let me reach that. Beseder. So now, just circling back, what we had the story of Nehemiah, right, where we said originally you were only allowed to carry the most basic dishes and utensils and food, obviously, but not any other tools or any other items at all. And then chazov v'tiru, this all happened in Nehemiah's time. Then, apart from that, we had the story of David HaMelech, where we learned that a dead body is Muktze, even though he was before Nehemiah, right? So that's one issue, right? Now, so that's one question, right? What happened in Nehemiah's time that didn't happen before? That's one question. Another question is, why is the Rambam looking for other reasons for Muktze? The Gemara seemed to provide a reason for the Muktze. So, Aruch HaShulchan says like this. Aruch HaShulchan basically says, I'll say what he says, and then I'll read it a bit quickly in the Aruch HaShulchan. What? Page 5. Right on page 5. Aruch HaShulchan basically says like this. He says, this whole story, the whole story on Dev Kuf Daled, where in Nehemiah's days, there was a general Isur on all carrying everything effectively, right? And then Chazur v'Tiru, they ended up in a very different place. That was a very, very localized chumrah. It was a very, very localized gzera that existed only in Nehemiah's time. And by the time Nehemiah died, or whatever, within a few years, in that period, it was over, right? On page 1, on page 1, we have the Gemara there in Shabbat Kuf Kav Gimel Amud Bet. Barishona yomrim shlosha kelim tilim b'Shabbat. You can only carry, apart from dishes and your most basic utensils, you can carry only these specific items. And then chazu v'tiru, right? The process of alleviating this gzera. Now, the question is, how far did that go? We assumed until now that we still have a few things left over from that gzera. Says Aruch HaShulchan, no. Says Aruch HaShulchan, the gzera was completely cancelled, and we went back to the original halacha, meaning long before any of this gzera, there was already gzera of Muktze. Came Nehemiah and said, don't carry anything, and slowly relieved the gzera. When the Gemara says at the end of the Gemara, B'mei Nehemiah ben Chachaliah nishten Mishnah zo, what it means is only in the time of Nehemiah ben Chachaliah. This whole Braita is something that was in the time of Nehemiah ben Chachaliah. It's a historical artifact. It doesn't really affect any halacha at all. Nehemiah expanded. Sorry?
It was never intended.
Mashu kaze. Yes. Yes.
On himself.
Yes. Let's see. You see the Aruch HaShulchan Seif Gimel. Basically, in Seif Gimel, he says, when did they cancel? Chazur v'tiru, when did that happen? It couldn't have been much later than Nehemiah. It must have been around Nehemiah's time. It can't be that Beit Din 100 years after Nehemiah said, you know what, this is a bit too tough. Let's make the Gzera not as strict, because who would have the authority to do such a thing? That's his point here. Seif Gimel, נראה לי דברי הרמב"ם צודקים ומוכחים. אי אפשר כדעת תחילת גזירת מוקצות התחילו בימי נחמיה, התירו וחזרו והתירו. אין בית דין יכול לבטל דברי קודמים, שהיו גדולים בחוכמה ובמניין, מהראשונים. לא מסתבר שהאחרונים הם גדולים מהראשונים. גם לא מסתבר שבימי נחמיה עצמו התירו וחזרו והתירו. זה בימי נחמיה היו הנביאים חגי זכריה מלאכי, כשהם אסרו יעז אחר כך להתיר, מה שאסרו הם. עזרא היה איתם. אין יכרחם להתיר מה שאסרו, אלא ודאי עניין אחר הוא, וכך הוא הצעת הדברים. It says we have a problem with an authority question. Who was able to change the gzera? This is like this. איסורי מוקצות היו מאז שניתנה תורה. דינם אז, כאחר שחזרו והתירו וחזרו והתירו. So right after Matan Torah, came Moshe Rabbeinu, said, you know what? These 3 reasons the Rambam wrote. The three reasons the Rambam wrote were things that already Moshe Rabbeinu or Yoshua Binu already thought of and said, you know what? People shouldn't be carrying things needlessly. Because that'll make Shabbat like Chol, because you might do an Isur, so all those reasons. Skipping to those three dots on the third line, last line of the page. עמד הוא ועזרא וחגי ישחי המלאכי ואנשי כנסת הגדולה וגזרו על דורם עוד חומרות ולא התירו רק אלא שלושת הכלים ורק הגזירות קבועות לדורות. אחר כך כשראו שחזרו להיזהר בשבת התירו וחזרו והתירו עוד שנשאר כפי הדברים הקודמים וכפי ההלכה שאצלנו, meaning they completely cancelled the whole gzera of Nehemiah's time was completely cancelled, and then by the same people who did it within that generation. So as I said, it was a very localized gzera only for that generation.
And his proof is that's the only way it could have been.
Right. Proof it could have been, could not have been done different otherwise. Right. And what that would mean is that ultimately what we have, the gzerative tool we have is something that exists from Moshe Rabbeinu's time, whatever. And this whole idea of Nechemiah and Chachaliah was just another good idea that they had a different generation. But the Gemara makes the point of saying, oh, all those bright that you have, they're all a mistake. They're all not part of the canonical halacha. They were localized gzera for his time, and afterwards it was cancelled and no longer relevant. Now, one way of the next step of the Aruch HaShulchan would be that the reason for Muktze brought on that page might be only for Nehemiah's specific gzera. Nehemiah's gzera was to asser everything because he said, I don't want people carrying on Shabbos. In Nehemiah's time, there was business going on Shabbat. Nehemiah was trying to figure out how to stop people from doing business on Shabbat. Part of the problem, the main problem, it seemed, from you read the Psukim, you see that what he's concerned with is people carrying their goods. So I say, okay, now you can't carry anything. And then you won't carry goods in Rishut HaRabim. But that's specific gzera for his time. What I have lehalacha is not that gzera. What I have lehalacha is completely different gzera. Now, Rekevet HaMishnah's point still stands. In other words, the process of alleviating the gzera can still be indicative of why of the reasons behind the reasons behind the gzera. Right.
This is commerce.
Right. But when I say, oh, you know what? Carry one person, because really Moshe Rabbeinu was already concerned about people carrying too much on Shabbat, schlepping too much, etc. That's where the Rambam would read the Gemara. So that's the Aruch HaShulchan's take. The Bach says that the Rambam was adding more reasons. The Rambam doesn't seem very perturbed by this whole thing. נראה דף הרמב"ם מודד איסור מוקצה משום מוצא. תן טעם לסמיכות דין איסור מוקצה לדין איסור הילוך, כתב דכי היכי דהזהיר הנביא שלא יהיה לוחה של שבת כלוחה של חול, חל ממנו טיטול של שבת כטיטול של חול. Meaning, the Rambam, basically, the Bach says, whatever, these are good reasons. That's effective as the Bach is saying. Why is the Rambam looking for new reasons? Because they're good ones, because he seems to be right. If you ask most people, you ask them, why are you not allowed to carry Muktze on Shabbos? What will they say? To learn Melacha, right? I think that's what most people assume until they learn the Sugya, right? Right?
Yeah.
And they say, okay, so why are you not allowed to carry sticks and stones?
Are you or not?
Why are you not allowed? Right. So first of all, they don't know. As I said, right, the raw potato test, right? How do people know that it's that carrying a screwdriver on Shabbat is less chamor than carrying a raw potato? Most people don't realize that, right? People are just not aware, right? People haven't learned the exam. I'll tell you what.
That you could possibly
Right.
Raw potato, I think most people, 90% of people
Are not aware.
no.
Right.
Whatever.
I mean, I'm talking like a big shot. When I was in Shiur Vav, I think I decided to learn Shabbat. I was doing Shabbat effectively on my own with the Chavruta in the afternoons, whatever. So I took Rav Rimon's shiurim and would listen to them. And his opening shiur had this idea of the potato and the screwdriver, and there are no phones there. Not quite as prevalent as they are today. He gave this example, and it blew my mind. This is a stark Shurvev guy, right? I was like, wait, wow, I never, was completely unaware of this. I didn't realize that's more common than that. You just don't know these things until you're in the sugiyot. So, the Bach says that there are a few common sense reasons apart from the Tiltul issue, apart from the Hotzam Shul issue. There are a few common sense reasons. So the Rambam brings them. Why not? Basically, Merkavat the Mishnah Merkavat the Mishnah. He already explained where the Rambam derived the Isurim from. He didn't answer a very simple question. Why did he ignore the one that's written in the Gemara? His answer is because the Gemara is referring to Beit Shammai. The Gemara says that Beit Shammai roser Muktze because of Tiltul, because of Hotzam Shel Reshut. Yeah, keep on saying Tiltul. Because of Hotzam Shel Reshut. Beit Shammai, the Gemara of Kuf Gimel says the reason you're not allowed to, the reason we established the Isur of Tiltul of Muktze is because of Hotzam Shel Reshut. Says Merkav Mishnah, okay, that's Beit Shammai. Now, it's very difficult in the Gemara because the Gemara seems to say, but don't we know that Muktze is because of the Hotzam Shel Reshut?
Right.
When you say Muktze, you see went in the top 10.
So Hotzam Shel Reshut.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how good the Muktze.
Right. So the Gemara seems to say, well, we know that's the reason. We know that's the reason according to Beit Shammai, but not according to Beit Hillel, and according to them, there's different reasons. It's a bit surprising and strange in the Gemara, that's the truth. But broadly speaking, Aruch HaShulchan says that the whole Aruch HaShulchan and Merkav Mishnah agree that carrying Muktze was asur. It was a very local gzera, carrying Muktze in order to avoid Hotzam Shel Reshut. It's a very local gzera, and the Bach says no, we don't. It's not that we're erasing the Hotzam Shel Reshut. It's just that we have other and more common sense reasons.
Actually, according to that, the main reason is that.
Right, correct. There are a few other, there are a few other reasons. There are nice reasons. The Rambam is a good writer. The Rambam writes well. Fun. Right, correct. Yes. So that point out. So now I want to lead back to that point. Correct. The Aruch HaShulchan solves our problem with David HaMelech and says, well, we've had since the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, since the time of Yoshua ben Nun, and then we already had this whole issue of not carrying Muktze on Shabbat. So the whole David HaMelech story works out well. And the Gemara ends up saying, what it means is it was only for that, it was only in that generation. By the end of that generation, the Gedolim of that generation passed away, the Gzera passed as well. Right, because only they were able to alleviate the Gzera.
Right, so you had to come up with a new reason for Muktze at that point. It just seems that this reason that you'll take out into Rishus is it seems odd because I'm guessing far more non-Muktze items that you still have that issue with than you have Muktze items. So to say, I'm going to take 20% or 15% of what you could potentially think, and I'm going to make a reduction of 15%.
So for this purpose, the truth is I have so much trouble because I know it's coming. I have a lot of trouble teaching this year because I know it's coming, and I know it's coming is Shulchan Aruch Harav, who seems to say what seems to me the most common sense understanding, the most reasonable understanding. When you look at the whole sugya, I felt like I was lying a lot of the time because I know it's coming. That really, when you think about it, there are two very, very different things. One is Muktze. What are the prime examples of Muktze?
That you carry, per se, although admittedly you're carrying them, but things that that are electronic, things that are
okay,
stuff that you shouldn't be touching, whether you're carrying them or not.
What does the Gemara? Wait, what does the Gemara call those things? The Gemara is a term for those things. Specific term for those things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is a prime example of that? That would be a prime example of Kishach Isul. What about, or are those the prime examples of Muktze? Why?
When I was growing up, my mother said, we don't move the Shabbat candles.
Okay.
So I think in a pre-electric age, if you think about what represented coal, it would have been something like that.
Yefe. So,
Yeah, the Gemara exam was a piece of that I have there, right? The knife, the key, the professional tool.
okay.
That's what the classic example.
So my point is different. My point is the exact opposite of what all of you are saying. That the prime examples of those are prime examples. Everything you're saying, prime examples of Kli Shach L'Isur. The prime example in the Gemara,
Mechamat Gufo, which is like what you were saying before about the potato or rocks, I think, are the right.
or
Those
the
are
dead body,
or the dead body. Those are the more classic Muktze, right?
which means we have two different things. We have two different categories. So there's a thing called Muktze, which is things that are not tools, they're not food. They're not, and then they're not part of. So there's something that's separate from human use. And then we have kilim. We have tools. What kilim? Tools, right? Utensils, tools. Now, within the world of tools and utensils, those things, within that world, there's a thing called kli shenochto leisur, kli shenochto le'eter, etc. Right? So the more what seems to be more reasonable when you look at the two Gemaras, you say, in David HaMelech's time, what were you not allowed to carry on Shabbat? You're not allowed to carry a dead body, right? That's where we take that from. Okay, so what is the dead body? It's not a tool. So that's Muktze. There's a different thing, Gzerat Kelim, that says you're not allowed to carry tools, but only very specific ones and only in specific circumstances.
Like if there's a dead body on it. There a whole
So again, the dead body on it, that's upset. Now we're talking about what is a basis? What is it? I'm steering clear of those things because those are a bit more complicated, but we'll get to them. Don't worry. But I'm just saying, broadly speaking, the distinction would be in the David HaMelech's time, there was a gzera not to carry anything that's not part of your. Yes, it wasn't yet made part of the human of people's use. Part of what people use, part of what we do, right? So that's the sticks and stones and the raw potato and all those things. Now, I'm going back to what Glenn was saying before. All those things, why shouldn't you carry those things? Because why should you carry those things? You should only carry things that have some kind of use and you know what the use is. Otherwise, don't carry things that are generally needless, that aren't part of your, what's the word for mirchav, right? Not part of your space. It's not exactly, you know what I mean, like the useful space. All these things that haven't yet been made part of your space, you shouldn't be carrying it all on Shabbat because it's best not to. It's best to, and then 99% of the world, the things that you're not going to be moving around at all on Shabbat, right? Everything on the street, you can't move on Shabbat, right? Only things that are already part of your home, only things that are already part of, and then not to carry the knife out, not to carry your watch out, not to carry, but those are things you have to contend with anyway, right? It's part of your home. You have to contend with them. Things that you don't have to contend with, don't. So don't take sticks, don't take stone, just don't. Came Nehemiah and said something new and something different and said, let's not carry any tools at all. Okay, why not? Here the Ramabam has three reasons. Why not to carry tools and utensils, things that are part of the human sphere, the human use.
that you're not allowed to do.
Or that, but that's a very different reason. When I say don't carry a rock on Shabbat, it's not because you might, I don't know, what is there you can do with the rock? The dead body. What is there you can do with the dead body? Right? Those all have to do with tiltul, with Hotzam Reshut. That's what you call Muktze. That's classic Muktze. There's a different thing called Kli Shenochto le'isur, which is a Kli. Right. So before that gzera, before Nehemiah, you're allowed to carry it around on Shabbat. Came Nehemiah and said, don't carry it around on Shabbat. Because why not? Because of the reasons Rambam said. Let's see, but Ramban, Ritva, you'll see that they say they make these distinctions. Well, what? Page 6, yes. You see how it says in the underlined line, and delayed by mishum הקצאה, לאיסור מלאכתו גורמת לו. Maybe we'll skip to the Ritva who says more clearly. כלים של מלאכתם לאיסור, לא מידי מוקצה נגעו בהם לאיסור, אלא טלטולו שאסור גזירה משום הוצאה. Oh, by the way, the Ritva doesn't accept the Rambam's reason. I was saying the Rambam, how you can explain. The Ritva says that the reason is the same reason. The reason is the same reason because of Hotza'ah, but he says there are two different things. There's Kli Shemachto Le'isur, and there's Muktze. There's Muktze, which is the sticks and stones, and there's a Kli Shemachto Le'isur. It's not Muktze, it's a Kli. But Machto Le'isur, so don't carry it. Now the Ritva doesn't accept the Rambam's reasons and says also the both are meant to avoid carrying on Shabbat. So you see the distinction is very clear. See in Shulchan Aruch Harav, the לא גזרו בימי נחמיה אלא על כלים לא לחולים וספרים. והרי מחשב כמו קודם הגזירה של בימי נחמיה שהיה מותר לטלטל כל דבר ראוי בשבת, אפילו שלא לצורך כלל. אבל הדבר שאינו ראוי בשבת היה אסור לטלטל אף בבית דוד ושלמה, או קודם לכן. כן, what is ראוי, you see from the if you read the Shulchan Aruch Harav, you'd see that he says Ra'ui means that's part of the human sphere, part of what's already become part of human use. Why? Right, exactly. So all those things, and then there's that distinction, right? In David HaMelech's time, what was usher is all those things that are called Muktze, meaning things that are Muktze from human use, aren't yet part of the human sphere. Apart from that, there's nothing called Kli Shemachto Le'isur. And this will build up our syllabus for the next few Shiurim, because we will do in the next few units, in the next 3 or 4 units, if I can look it up as it's open here anyway. So in the next 4 units, 4.5 units, we're going to learn about Muktze, meaning things that are not, right, as I'm going to say in Hebrew many times, lo kli v'lo ochel, right? What is not what's the right word for kli? The tool, but it's not always tool. The utensil, okay. Right, because it's a broader definition than utensil. This is a couch is a kli in this context. Yes. It's whatever was prepared for human use, which would be food or items that were prepared for human use. That's one kind of that's the Muktze. That's going to be the next 4 units. And after that, we're going to learn about, and then after that, we're going to have 2 separate units about Kli Shemachto Le'isur and how that works. Because these are separate in terms of the halachic definitions, they work differently. So
the Muktze stuff.
Have a look, just one look in the quick look in the Rambam. The Rambam in Halacha Aleph says Ish Kli Shemachto Le'heter. So now I'm skipping to Halacha Bet. Right. Nachon. Or a cup, or a bowl, or a cup, or a bowl, or yeah. Halacha Bet. Right. Nachon. It can also be a table. Yesh Kli Shemachto Le'isur. Kli שאסור לעשות בו בשבת דבר שנעשה בו. Now, and then Halacha Gimel, he says, Kli Shemachto Le'heter. Beina shel etz or cheres or even, that doesn't matter. Mutal tatelo b'Shabbat. You're allowed to carry Kli Shemachto Le'heter ben b'shil atzmo shel kli ben letzorech mekomo ben letzorech gufo. Kli Shemachto Le'isur shel etz cheres avanim mutal tatelo b'Shabbat ben letzorech gufo ben letzorech mekomo ובשביל עצמו של כלי אסור. So here's the distinction between Kli Shemachto Le'isur and Kli Shemachto Le'heter.
In other words, if a cup is on the trailer, what can you use it now?
You're allowed to carry it freely. That's what he says. Yes. You could also carry it to put it away for itself, to hide it from the children. Yes.
If the stone is there.
I'm not up to stones yet.
Okay, so what is you have a
My hammer. I brought my hammer to crack nuts. So I'm allowed to carry it to crack the nuts, and I'm allowed to move it away because I don't want a hammer on the table, but I can't move it away so that the kids won't play with it. Unless you hold pikuach nefesh, whatever. But setting that aside.
And you can use it both for stone.
Correct.
Oh, could you understand?
And then you see in halacha vav,
So what is that?
the hammer, whatever is normally used for isur. For isur melacha, yeah, of course.
Scissors would do that on a knife.
Correct, yes. Unless specialized.
Or what special scissors?
I was going to say a specialized shechita knife.
That would be Muktze.
Yes, or at least clean hadal isur. Yes, yes, possibly. So yeah, I was right. That's
But
gonna
but
make things complicated later on.
take household scissors
Yes,
that you are going to use to open a package of food on Shabbat.
Correct. yes,
So that's a kli shemalachto leheter, because you're opening it for
So
food.
you're
But
raising an interesting question.
Might say it's scissors, you shouldn't have it use it on Shabbat.
Right. So here you're raising an interesting question. We're going to get to the machlokot about that later on, right? When I have a kli shemalachto isur and I say, okay, now I'm allowed to use it. Does that mean that am I allowed to use it because I'm allowed to use kli shemalachto isur letzorech gufo, right, for its normal use, right, like opening the cereal box on Shabbat? Am I allowed to use it for that, or am I saying something? What you're saying is something deeper. You're claiming when I take the scissors to do something mutar on Shabbos, they become effectively kli shemalachto leheter. Because I'm doing something mutar with them. But I just want to point out that what I want from the Rambam was mainly the halacha vav. Another thing called she'eno kli. That's another category. Avanim, ma'ot, kanim, kawot, katzeben, asol, tatelan. Ma'ot is a very interesting thing, right? Money is generally very interesting, right? Everyone wants to talk about money. But money is a very interesting thing because money has no self-value. Money isn't a kli. Why? You're saying they're definitely not.
There's a weight.
Right. Oh, I thought you meant with inflation, but yeah, but nachon in different era, right? When you sell gold, right? But again, with the value, even when the coins were actually gold or silver or whatever, the value they had wasn't as a kli. A hammer has a value because it's a tool that's useful, right? But money doesn't have a value as a tool that's useful. Also, the gold content of it doesn't have a value in terms of as a tool that's useful. Its inner value, again, if we're talking about the value of the actual gold, the weight in gold, right? So then right, it's again. If we're talking about the weight in gold, so we're looking at the what do you call it? We're looking at the raw gold. That's not a kli, right? So that's in that sense, right? In terms of the money itself, what can you do with the money? Exchange it, okay, but it's not. There's no value unto itself, right?
In many places, money is more muktze than a stone.
What do you mean many places? No, the Rambam puts them together. That's why I found it interesting. I'm just pointing out the Rambam put the money between the sticks, the stones, and the whatever, beams. The beams.
Than we are with respect to a stone.
Right, correct. Yes. Correct. Right.
In practice.
Oh, in practice, people usually think of money as Muktze because they think money is kli shemalachto isur. Now I'm saying is money is worse. Why? Because it's a not kli shemalachto isur.
I think so. I'm saying child carrying a stone. If the child needed to be carried, you could carry the child with the stone. But if the child's carrying money, then you really can't. And
right. So the Rambam, right, correct. The Rambam puts them together. I think in our minds we're more machmir because like this. You can have a screwdriver, which is a kli, but melachto isur. You can have a stone, which is not a kli, but it's melachto not isur. You can have money, which is not a kli and melachto isur. Right? It's not a kli, but what you do with it is something you're allowed to do on Shabbat. That we'll get to. That we'll have to get to the question of is there right.
Otherwise, it's like
Right. Yeah, beseder. We'll get to that. We'll get that separately. But my point is that the Rambam himself also makes this distinction. The Rambam, unfortunately, the Rambam would have made our lives much easier. The Rambam said in Halacha Daled, why aren't you allowed to carry these things on Shabbat? Because of those three reasons. Then Halacha Zayin said, well, there's another issue of Hatzam Rishut, and that's why we have Halacha Vav. The Rambam did not do us that favor, right? But we do see that the Rambam, so there's a big machloket achronim, whatever, I didn't go too deeply into it here because whatever, but there are many discussions about, does the Rambam really see these two categories as completely separate the way the Ramban and the Ritva do? The Ramban and the Ritva see these categories as completely separate. There's Gzirat Kelim, which is one thing, and there's Muktze, which is a totally different story. The Rambam, again, you can read the halachot, it looks like one set of things, right? Just different heterim, but that's all. Or you can say, no, there are two different things. There's Kelim, and Halachot Aleph Tehei are all about Kelim, and there's another thing called Lo Kli, especially not a Kli. So that...